Hey guys, welcome back to Fantasy Hub. Today's story is one of my favorites.
It started, of all places, in a bakery. Sweet Delights in Mobile, Alabama, a place where flour dusted the air like fairy magic, and the scent of cinnamon could make even the loneliest heart feel warm. I was Lillian Carter, tour guide by day, hopeless romantic by night, and that evening, I was the only single woman in a room full of couples. A chuckle. I remember gripping my whisk like a weapon, determined to prove I didn't need a partner to make a damn good souffle. My best friend Maya had signed me up for this class as a birthday gift or punishment, depending on how you looked at it. You need to get out there, Lil, she'd said. Stop hiding behind your history books and meet someone. The sound of a camera shutter clicking, and then I saw her. A beat. The sound grows softer, more intimate. Jade, wild curls that caught the light like spun gold, ink-stained fingers from developing film, and a smile that could melt butter. She was leaning against the counter, snapping photos of the mixing bowls like they held state secrets. When our eyes met, she smirked and said, "You look like you're about to declare war on that batter." Laughed softly. I should have known then she was trouble, the good kind. The kind that makes you forget your own name and remember what it feels like to be alive. She had this way of moving through the world like she owned it, but not in an arrogant way. More like she understood some secret about life that the rest of us were still trying to figure out. When the instructor, Mrs. Henderson, a sweet woman, with powdered sugar permanently dusted on her apron, announced we'd be working in pairs, Jade didn't hesitate. Footsteps approaching, she walked right up to me, extended her hand, and said, "I'm Jade Morrison, and I'm about to ruin whatever you're planning to make." Her handshake was firm, her skin warm, and I felt this jolt on electricity, exactly. But something deeper, recognition maybe, like my soul was saying, "Oh, there you are. I've been waiting." A pause, emotional. I introduced myself, and she tilted her head, studying me like I was one of her photographs. "Lillian Carter," she repeated, rolling my name around on her tongue like she was tasting it. "That's a storyteller's name if I ever heard one." She was right, of course. I'd been telling stories my whole life, first as a history major, then as a tour guide, weaving narratives that made the past feel alive. We were paired together, fate or the universe's idea of a joke. Jade didn't know a spatula from a spoon, but she made up for it in charm. While I measured ingredients with the precision of a chemist, she treated baking like performance art. Every movement was deliberate, graceful, even when she was doing it completely wrong. Laughter. "You're supposed to fold the flour in gently," I told her, watching her attack the batter with the enthusiasm of someone digging a hole. She looked up at me, flour already dusting her cheek, and grinned. "Gentle's not really my style." Then she flicked flour at me, just a tiny bit, but enough to dust my nose. The sound of mock outrage. I retaliated, of course. What started as a playful tap of flour on her shoulder escalated into a full-scale food fight. Flour ended up in my hair. I retaliated with a smear of chocolate on her nose. The other couples stared at us like we were insane, but we didn't care. We were in our own little world, and it was beautiful. Music shifts to something softer. By the end of the night, we were laughing so hard we burned the cookies. And when she licked the batter off my finger, my heart did a flip I couldn't explain. It wasn't just attraction, though God knows there was plenty of that. It was something deeper. Like she was teaching me a new language, and I was finally ready to learn. We left the bakery together, walking slowly toward the parking lot, like neither of us wanted the night to end. The air was thick with the promise of rain, and the streetlights cast everything in a golden glow. She carried her camera bag slung over her shoulder, and I noticed how she kept glancing at the shadows, the way the light fell across the brick buildings. A pause. You see stories everywhere, don't you? She asked, stopping suddenly. We were standing under a streetlight, and she was looking at me with this intensity that made my breath catch. In the buildings, the people, the way someone holds their coffee cup. You're always collecting narratives. A soft laugh. I was surprised she'd noticed. Most people saw me as the peppy tour guide who knew random facts about antebellum architecture. But Jade saw deeper. And you see beauty in the overlooked, I replied. In the mixing bowls, the flour dust, the way steam rises from hot chocolate. You're documenting moments most people miss, the sound of rain beginning to fall. She smiled, not the playful smirk from earlier, but something softer, more real. I think we're going to be trouble together, Lily and Carter. The rain started. Then just a light drizzle, and she pulled me under the awning of a closed shop. We stood there, inches apart, and I thought she might kiss me. Instead, she said, tomorrow night. There's a photography exhibit at the gallery on Dauphin Street. Come with me. A bead. I said yes before I could think of all the reasons I shouldn't. The gallery was packed with Mobile's artsy crowd photographers, painters, writers, and the wealthy patrons who kept the local art scene alive. Jade moved through the space like she belonged there, introducing me to people whose names I'd seen in the local arts paper but had never met. Footsteps on hardwood floors. This is Lillian, she'd say, her hand resting on the small of my back. She's a storyteller. She makes the past feel like the present. The way she talked about me with such pride and admiration made me feel like I was someone worth knowing. A pause, emotional. But it was when we stood in front of her photographs that I really understood who Jade Morrison was. Her work was displayed in a corner of the gallery, a series called Hidden Mobile. Each image captured something ordinary, made extraordinary. A homeless man's weathered hands wrapped around a coffee cup. Rain-soaked cobblestones reflecting neon signs. A child's abandoned toy in Washington Square Park. Voice dropping to a whisper. They're beautiful, I whispered, studying a photograph of the old oak trees in Detonti Square. She'd captured them at dawn, the light filtering through the Spanish moss like something out of a fairy tale. You see magic in everything. A soft laugh. She stepped closer, close enough that I could smell her perfume, something woodsy and warm. Not everything, she said, but you? You're definitely magical. This time, when she leaned in, I didn't pull away. Our first kiss was soft, tentative, surrounded by her art and the gentle hum of cultured conversation. We spent the next month like that, baking disasters, late-night walks by the bay, her showing me the world through her lens, me dragging her into historic alleys she'd never noticed. It was easy, natural, like we'd been waiting for each other, without realizing it. The sound of laughter. She'd pick me up after my tours, camera always in hand, ready to explore. I'd take her to the places tourists never saw, the hidden courtyards, the forgotten graveyards, the buildings where civil war soldiers once slept. She'd photograph everything, capturing angles and shadows that made familiar places feel mysterious again. A pause. Tell me about this place, she'd say, pointing her camera at a crumbling brick wall or an ornate iron gate, and I would. I'd tell her about the families who lived there, the parties they threw, the secrets they kept. She'd listen with this intensity, like my words were helping her see more than just what was in front of her lens. Music shifts to something more intimate. We'd end up at her apartment afterward, a converted loft above a vintage shop on Royal Street. She'd develop her film while I cooked dinner, and we'd talk about everything and nothing. She told me about growing up in Birmingham, about her mother who died when she was 16, about how photography became her way of holding on to moments before they disappeared. Voice growing softer, I told her about my family, about my grandmother who raised me on stories of old Mobile, about how I'd always felt like I was living in the past until I met her. She made me want to be present, to stop hiding behind other people's histories and start creating my own. A sigh. We hadn't slept together yet, not in the way that mattered. There had been kisses, touches, moments when we'd fall asleep on her couch tangled together. But we were taking it slow, building something real. At least that's what I thought. It was a Thursday night in October. We'd had dinner at this little seafood place on the bay, sharing a bottle of wine and laughing about her latest photography disaster. She'd accidentally exposed an entire roll of film to light. 24. Perfect shots of pure white, she'd said, and somehow made it sound like an artistic statement. The sound of footsteps on wooden planks. After dinner, we walked along the waterfront, her hand in mine, watching the lights reflect on the water. The air was crisp, carrying the scent of salt and possibility. She'd been quieter than usual, distracted, and I wondered if she was thinking about the same thing I was. How natural this felt, how right. A pause. "Lil," she said suddenly, stopping near the old pier. "I need to tell you something." Her voice was serious, almost nervous, and my heart did that thing where it forgets how to beat properly. "I'm falling in love with you, not fallen. Past tense. Completely gone. An emotional laugh. I kissed her then, right there under the streetlights with the Gulf breeze in our hair. "Good," I whispered against her lips. "Because I'm already there." We held each other for a long moment, and I remember thinking this was it. This was the moment I'd look back on as the beginning of everything. The sound of rain beginning. The rain started as we walked back to her car, just the light sprinkle at first. We were holding hands, giddy with new love, taking our time. That's when she suggested the shortcut. We were laughing, huddled, under her jacket, cutting through an alley between Dauphin and Government Street to get to her car. The rain was coming down harder now, and we were both soaked, but it felt romantic. Like we were in some indie film where the leads dance in the rain. The laughter stops abruptly, then voices, rough, jeering. Look at the lesbians holding hands. Think they need a real man? 3 of them, maybe 4. I couldn't tell in the dim light, but I could smell the alcohol, feel the hatred radiating from them like heat. A sharp inhale. Jade pushed me behind her immediately, her body becoming a shield between me and them. I remember her voice steady, but her hands shook. "Walk away," she said, firm but not aggressive. "We don't want any trouble." But they did. They wanted trouble. They wanted to hurt us for the crime of loving each other. The sound of footsteps getting closer. "You dykes think you're so tough," one of them slurred. "Let me show you what you're missing." That's when I knew we were in real danger. I fumbled for my phone, trying to call 911, but my hands were shaking too badly. A crash. The first punch sent Jade stumbling backward into me. I caught her, felt her blood on my hands, and something primal took over. I didn't think I just reacted. I launched myself at the closest one, clawing at his face, screaming for help. But there were too many of them, and we were alone in that alley with the rain washing our blood into the gutters. A shaky breath. I fought, screamed, felt knuckles split my lip, felt a boot connect with my ribs. But the worst part? The silence. After just the rain, our ragged breaths, and the distant wail of an ambulance someone had finally called. They found us 20 minutes later, a couple walking their dog, heard the screaming, and called 911. By then, our attackers had fled, leaving. He was broken and bleeding on the wet pavement. I remember the paramedic's face, young and kind, as he knelt beside me. "Ma'am, can you tell me your name?" A pause. I could barely speak. My lip was split, my ribs felt like they were on fire, and all I could think about was Jade. "Where is she?" I kept asking. "Is she okay?" But they wouldn't let me see her, wouldn't tell me anything except that she was alive. The sound of a hospital emergency room. The emergency room was chaos, bright lights, rushing nurses, the smell of antiseptic and fear. They cleaned my wounds, took x-rays, asked questions I couldn't answer. Who were they? Why did they attack? You? Did you know them? The police came later, two detectives who looked like they'd rather be anywhere else. Voice growing bitter. Can you describe the attackers? They asked, pens poised over their notepads. I told them what I could remember, young men, white, drunk, angry. But what I really wanted to tell them was that it didn't matter what they looked like. What mattered was the hatred in their voices, the way they saw us as less than human. A long pause. They never caught them. The alley had no cameras, no witnesses except us, and our memories were fractured by trauma and pain. The case went cold within weeks, just another hate crime in a city that preferred not to acknowledge such things happened. I woke up bandaged, aching and not alone. Jade was in the bed next to mine, her face a canvas of bruises, her arm in a sling. But when she saw me awake, she smiled, crooked, painful, beautiful. Hey, partner. We've looked better. A wet laugh. She'd taken the worst of it, 3 broken ribs, a concussion, and a dislocated shoulder. But she was alive, and she was smiling at me like I was sunshine after a storm. How long have we been here? I asked, my voice hoarse from screaming. A pause. 2 days, she said. You've been in and out. They said you have a concussion too and some internal bruising. But Lil, we're going to be okay. Banged up, but okay. The way she said it with such certainty made me believe it might be true. The nurses called it skin-to-skin therapy, keeping us close, letting our hands brush when they changed bandages, our whispered words stitching us back together. It was supposed to help with shock, they said. Human contact releases oxytocin, reduces stress hormones, promotes healing. Voice dropping, intimate, but what they couldn't measure was how her touch became my anchor. When the nightmares came, and they did come, every time I closed my eyes, she'd reach across the gap between our beds and find my hand in the darkness. Her fingers, still bandaged from where she'd fought them off, would trace patterns on my palm. A soft sigh. Tell me a story, she'd whisper during the worst nights, when the pain medication wasn't enough and sleep felt impossible. So I would. I'd tell her about the houses we'd passed on our tours, about the families who lived there, about love stories that survived wars and tragedies and time itself. The sound of rain against windows. One night, during a particularly bad thunderstorm, she reached across the gap between our beds. Her fingers tangled with mine, and she whispered, "Next time, I'm choosing the damn bakery location." I kissed her knuckles, tasting salt and antiseptic and something indefinably her. A pause, emotional, and just like that, we weren't just victims anymore. We were something else entirely. We were survivors, fighters, 2 women who'd found each other in the darkness and refused to let go. Maya came on the 3rd day, her face pale and her eyes red from crying. She stood in the doorway for a long moment, just looking at us, and I saw her struggle to compose herself. Jesus, Lil, she finally managed. I'm so sorry. I should have been there. I should have protected you. A gentle laugh. It's not your fault, I told her, though part of me wondered if it was. If I'd been straight, if I'd been normal, would this have happened? But Jade squeezed my hand, and the thought disappeared. Maya, this is Jade. Jade. My best friend Maya. The sound of a chair being pulled closer. Maya sat between our beds, and I watched her take in the extent of our injuries. The police called me, she said quietly. They want to know if you remember anything else. They think they might have a lead, but we both knew it was wishful thinking. Cases like ours rarely got solved, especially when the victims were 2 women who'd been in the wrong place at the wrong time. A pause. I Brought you something, Maya said, pulling out a small canvas bag. Your grandmother's recipe book. I thought, maybe when you get out of here, you could try baking again. Together, she looked at Jade when she said it, and I realized she was giving us her blessing, accepting what we meant to each other. Recovery was slow, painful, and sometimes felt impossible. Physical therapy 3 times a week, counseling sessions with a therapist who specialized in trauma, and the constant struggle to feel safe in our own skin again. But we did it together, step by step, refusing to let our attackers take anything more from us. The sound of walking with determination. The day we both walked without assistance was a victory. The day Jade picked up her camera again was a triumph. The day we left the hospital, holding hands and facing the world together, was a declaration of war against everyone who thought they could break us. A pause, emotional. We're not going to let them win, Jade said as we stood outside the hospital, breathing fresh air for the first time in weeks. We're going to live. We're going to love each other so loudly that it drowns out all the hate. I kissed her then, right there on the sidewalk, and I knew she was right. Jade's apartment felt different when we came home. The same books on the shelves, the same art on the walls, but we were different people now, marked by violence, but not defined by it. We moved carefully around each other, like we were relearning how to exist in the same space. A pause. That first night, we both had nightmares. I woke up screaming, convinced I was back in that alley, and found Jade sitting up in bed, her face wet with tears. I'm sorry, she whispered. I should have protected you better. I should have been stronger, but I knew the truth she'd saved my life by putting herself between me and them. The sound of soft crying. We held each other until dawn, sharing our fears and our gratitude. We're alive, I kept saying, like a mantra. We're alive, and we're together, and that's enough. It had to be enough, because the alternative was letting them win. The idea for Wander and Tell came to us 3 months later, during one of our regular coffee dates at a little cafe on Royal Street. We were both going stir-crazy from being cooped up, afraid to venture too far from each other, but desperate to reclaim our lives. The sound of pen on paper. What if we combined our talents? Jade suggested, sketching absently in her notebook. Your storytelling, my photography. We could create something beautiful together. I looked at her sketch, a rough outline of a walking tour map, marked with historical sites and hidden gems. A pause, thoughtful. We could tell the stories no one else tells. I added, feeling excitement building for the first time in months. The hidden queer history of Mobile. The places where people like us found love and community, even when the world said we shouldn't exist. Jade looked up from her sketch, eyes bright with possibility. The sound of pages turning. We spent the next week researching, digging through historical records and interviewing elderly members of the local LGBTQ community. We found stories of love hidden in plain sight, of resistance and resilience, of people who refused to be invisible. It was exactly what we needed, a way to honor our own story while celebrating the stories of those who came before us. We created Wander and Tell 6 months later, a tour company for stories like ours, the hidden queer history of Mobile, the alleys that sheltered runaways, the bakeries where love could bloom between batter and bruises. It was more than a business. It was a mission. The sound of footsteps on cobblestones. Our first tour was terrifying. 12 people showed up, mostly couples, some individuals, all curious about the stories we promised to tell. I stood at the starting point, Washington Square Park, with my notes trembling in my hands. Welcome to Wander and Tell, I began, my voice shaking. Where every corner has a story, and every story matters. A pause, emotional. Jade handled the visuals stunning. Raw photos that made people feel the weight of history, the beauty of hidden love, the importance of remembering. I crafted the narratives, weaving together past and present, making the struggles and triumphs of previous generations feel immediate and relevant. The sound of applause. By the end of that first tour, people were crying. Not from sadness, but from connection, from understanding that love has always found a way, even in the darkest times. We'd created something powerful, something that honored both our pain and our healing. Word spread quickly. The local paper did a feature on us, calling us the tour guides who make history personal. Travel blogs picked up the story. We were booked solid within 3 months, and we had to hire additional guides to keep up with demand. A pause, but the real success wasn't in the numbers. It was in the letters we received from people who'd taken our tours. A young woman from Birmingham who realized she wasn't alone in her struggle. An elderly man who finally understood his late partner's experiences. A teenager who found hope in stories of survival. The sound of laughter. We built a life together in those months, working side by side, sharing our stories, healing through the act of helping others heal. Jade's photography grew more powerful, capturing not just the hidden history of Mobile, but the faces of people discovering themselves in that history. A soft sigh, and together, we built a home in each other. Not just the physical space we shared, but something deeper. A sanctuary where our scars were badges of honor, where our love was a victory song, where every day was a choice to keep. Choosing each other, it wasn't always easy. There were days when the nightmares came back, when the sound of footsteps behind us on the street made us panic. There were moments when we snapped at each other, when the stress of building a business and healing from trauma at the same time felt overwhelming. A pause. We fought sometimes about money, about the direction of the company, about whether we were pushing ourselves too hard. But we also learned to fight fair, to communicate our fears instead of letting them fester. We went to couples counseling, not because we were broken, but because we wanted to stay whole. The sound of gentle conversation. Dr. Martinez, our therapist, helped us understand that trauma doesn't just disappear because you're in love. It becomes part of your story, part of how you love each other. You're not trying to forget what happened, she told us. You're learning to carry it together, to let it strengthen you instead of breaking you apart. A soft laugh, and slowly we did. We learned to see our scars as proof of our resilience, our hypervigilance as a sign of how much we valued what we'd built together. We learned that healing isn't about going back to who you were before, it's about becoming who you're meant to be after. A year to the day after the attack, we were supposed to have dinner at the same seafood restaurant where we'd been that night, but neither of us could do it. Instead, we ordered takeout and ate on her balcony, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of gold and pink. A pause. I've been thinking, Jade said, picking at her shrimp and grits. About that night. About what would have happened if we'd never taken that shortcut. I reached across the table and took her hand, her fingers warm and real and alive in mine. The sound of evening traffic below. We might have gone straight to your car, I sighed. Gone back to your place, made love for the first time, woken up happy and whole. She nodded, but her eyes were distant. But we also might never have started the company. We might never have found our purpose, our way of turning pain into power. A soft sigh. It was a strange kind of gratitude, being thankful for the worst night of our lives because it led to the best parts of our story. We weren't grateful for the violence, but we were grateful for what we built from the ashes of it. The next morning, Mrs. Henderson from Sweet Delights called. Lillian, dear, she said in her sweet southern drawl, I have a favor to ask. Could you and Jade come in tonight? I have something special planned for our anniversary couples. I was confused. We'd never told her about our anniversary. And besides, it wasn't exactly a celebration. A pause, but there was something in her voice, something excited and secretive that made me curious. What time? I asked. 7 o'clock, she said, and don't eat dinner first. I'm making something special. When I hung up, Jade was watching me with a strange expression. The sound of footsteps. What did she want? Jade asked, but she was already moving toward the closet, pulling out her best dress. She wants us to come to the bakery tonight. Something about anniversary couples. Jade's smile was mysterious, almost nervous. Well, we should probably go then. You know how much Mrs. Henderson loves her special occasions? When we arrived at Sweet Delights, the place was empty except for Mrs. Henderson, who greeted us with flower-dusted hugs and knowing smiles. Right on time, she said, leading us to a table set for two in the corner where we'd first met. Candles flickered in the dim light, and the whole space felt magical. A pause. Mrs. Henderson, I started. We're not actually celebrating our anniversary. Today is ... single quotes, but she held up a hand, her eyes twinkling. Oh, honey, I know exactly what today is. Jade told me all about it when she called yesterday. I looked at Jade, confusion and realization dawning at the same time. The sound of heels clicking on tiles. Jade was pacing now, her hands shaking slightly. Will, sit down, please. Her voice was different, nervous, excited, terrified. I sat at the table, and she knelt beside my chair, taking my hands in hers. I've been planning this for weeks, she said. I wanted it to be perfect, but also real. Like us. She didn't get down on one knee. Instead, she pulled her chair closer to mine, so close our knees were touching. Lillian Carter, she said, her voice steady now. A year ago tonight, we were broken in an alley, bleeding and afraid. But we didn't break. We bent, and then we grew stronger in the broken places. A pause, the sound of something being placed on the table. She reached into her pocket and pulled out a small velvet box, placing it on the table between us. But she didn't open it yet. Instead, she took my hands, her thumbs tracing the scars on my knuckles, the ones from fighting for us, for our right to exist and love freely. Voice trembling with emotion. I don't want to erase what happened to us, she continued. I don't want to pretend it didn't change us. But I want to spend the rest of my life proving that love is stronger than hate, that joy can grow from pain, that two women who found each other in flower and friendship can build something beautiful from the ashes of their worst day. Sound of the box opening. The ring was simple, a thin band of white gold with a small diamond that caught the candlelight like a star. But it was the inscription that made me gasp. She turned it so I could see the inside of the band, where tiny letters spelled out, skin to skin, heart to heart, a shaky breath. Lillian Carter, she said again, and now her voice was thick. With tears, you're the only story I want to tell for the rest of my life. Will you marry me? I couldn't speak. The words were there, but they were tangled up with everything I was feeling: love, gratitude, disbelief that this beautiful woman wanted to spend forever with me. So I did the only thing I could do. A pause. I kissed her. Right there in the bakery where we'd first met, surrounded by the scent of sugar and vanilla, with Mrs. Henderson crying happy tears in the background. I kissed her like she was air, and I was drowning like she was home and I'd been wandering lost my whole life. The sound of laughter through tears. Yes, I whispered against her lips. Yes, yes, 1,000 times yes. She slipped the ring on my finger, and it fit perfectly, just like us, just like everything about our messy, beautiful, hard-won love. The sound of applause. Mrs. Henderson appeared with champagne and two perfect soufflés, the dessert we'd failed to make that first night. These are on the house, she said, beaming at us. For the two women who taught me that love always finds a way. We stayed at the bakery for hours, talking and laughing and planning. Jade showed me the photos she'd been taking secretly, pictures. of us working together, laughing together, healing together. I wanted to document our story, she said. Not just the pretty parts, but all of it. The scars, the nightmares, the way we learned to love each other's broken pieces. A pause. We're going to have the most unconventional wedding photos, I said, looking at a picture she'd taken of me during one of our tours, my hands gesturing. As I told a story, my face lit up with passion. Good, she replied. Conventional was never really our style. The sound of planning excited voices. We talked about the wedding we wanted. Small, intimate, filled with the people who'd supported us through everything. Maya, of course, as my maid of honor. Jade's photography friends from Birmingham, Mrs. Henderson, who'd become like a surrogate grandmother to us both. The tour guides we'd hired who'd become family. A soft laugh. I want to get married in the spring, Jade said. When everything is blooming, when the world is full of new beginnings, I nodded, imagining us exchanging vows under the oak trees in Detonti Square, surrounded by Spanish moss and the scent of jasmine. As the night wore on and Mrs. Henderson finally left us alone with our soufflés and champagne, the conversation turned deeper. Are you sure? I asked, suddenly hit by the magnitude of what we were promising each other. Are you sure you want to tie yourself to someone who might always jump at unexpected sounds, who might always need to check the locks twice? A pause. Jade reached across the table and took my hand, the engagement ring catching the light. Well, I'm not marrying the woman you were before that night. I'm marrying the woman you became after it. The woman who turned trauma into triumph, who built a business from broken dreams, who loves me with every scarred and beautiful part of herself, voice dropping to a whisper. Besides, she added with a smile, I'm the woman who needs to. Photograph every shadow because I'm afraid of losing the light. I'm the woman who sometimes wakes up screaming because I dream about not being able to protect you. We're both damaged, but we're damaged together. And that's the best kind of love. Story I can imagine. Planning a wedding while running a business proved to be its own kind of adventure. We were booked solid through the spring with tours every weekend and special events during the week. But somehow, between telling other people's love stories, we found time to plan our own. The sound of fabric rustling, I found my dress. At a vintage shop on Royal Street, a simple cream-colored sheath from the 1960s that made me feel like Audrey Hepburn. Jade chose a flowing skirt and fitted top in pale blue, the color of the sky just before dawn. We're going to be the most photographed couple in Mobile, she joked, but her eyes were soft when she said it. A pause. The guest list was small, but meaningful. 37 people who'd been part of our story in some way. May flew in from Atlanta, where she'd moved for a new job. Jade's photography mentor from Birmingham drove down with his partner. Our tour guides offered to cover our bookings so we could have a proper honeymoon. 2 weeks before the wedding, I woke up in a cold sweat. Not from the usual nightmares, but from something worse, the fear that I wasn't ready for this. That I was too broken, too damaged to be anyone's wife. A pause. Jade found me on the balcony at 3 a.m, staring at the ring on my finger like it was a foreign object, having second thoughts. She asked gently, settling into the chair beside me. Her face was calm, but I could see the fear in her eyes, the sound of tears. What if I'm not enough? I whispered. What if the nightmares never stop? What if I can't give you the normal life you deserve? She was quiet for a long moment, and I thought maybe she was realizing the same thing, that we were rushing into something we weren't ready for. A soft laugh, but then she started laughing, not cool laughter, but the kind that comes from recognition. Well, do you see me as normal? Do you see what we've built together as normal? We're two women who fell in love over burnt cookies and survived a hate crime together. Normal was never on the table. The morning of our wedding dawned clear and bright, with the kind of spring weather that makes you believe in magic. I woke up in Maya's hotel room. We'd decided to spend the night apart, honoring the old tradition. Even though we'd been living together for over a year, the sound of laughter and preparation, Maya was already up, laying out my dress and shoes with military precision. "Today's the day, Mrs. Soon-to-be Morrison," she said, and I felt a flutter of excitement mixed with nerves. "Are you ready for this?" I looked at myself in the mirror, hair in curlers, face mask applied, eyes bright with anticipation. A pause. "I've been ready since the moment she licked cake batter off my finger," I replied, and Maya laughed. "God, you two are disgustingly perfect for each other." She helped me into my dress, zipping it up while I held my breath. When I looked in the mirror, I saw not just a bride, but a woman who'd fought for the right to love and won. We'd chosen Detani Square for the ceremony, the same place where Jade had taken that photograph of the oak trees that first night at the gallery. The Spanish moss hung like nature's own wedding decorations, and the afternoon light filtered through the leaves in golden streams. The sound of footsteps on grass. I walked down the aisle to Jade's favorite song, not the wedding march, but something by Nina Simone about feeling good. Maya walked beside me, her hand steady on my arm, and I saw our guests' faces light up as I approached. But all I could see was Jade, standing under the oak tree in her blue dress, tears streaming down her face. A pause, overcome with emotion. The ceremony was simple, personal. Our friend Marcus, a minister from the local Unity Church, spoke about love that overcomes, about the power of choosing each other every day. We'd written our own vows, and when it was my turn to speak, I looked into Jade's eyes and saw our whole story reflected there. Voice thick with emotion. "Jade Morrison," I said, my voice carrying across the square. "You taught me that love isn't about finding someone perfect. It's about finding someone who makes you want to be better, braver, more yourself than you ever thought possible. You've seen me at my worst and chosen to love me anyway. Today, I choose you back with all my scars and all my strength." Jade's vows were beautiful, heartbreaking, perfect. She talked about how I'd shown her that stories have power, that the past can inform the future without defining it. She promised to love me through nightmares and dreams, through the hard days and the easy ones, through whatever came next. A pause. "Lillian Carter," she said, her voice steady despite the tears. "You're my favorite story. Not because it's perfect, but because it's true, because it's ours. And I want to spend the rest of my life adding chapters to it, page by page, day by day, choice by choice." The sound of rings being exchanged. When Marcus pronounced us married, the kiss was soft, sweet, filled with promise. Our guests erupted in cheers, and someone, I think it was Maya, threw biodegradable confetti that caught the light like snow. We were married. We were wives. We were home. The reception was held at a small restaurant on the bay, the same area where we'd walked that night a year and a half ago. But this time, we were surrounded by love, by people who celebrated our story instead of trying to destroy it. The sound of toasts. Maya gave a speech that had everyone crying and laughing in equal measure. She talked about how I'd been waiting my whole life for someone who could see past my walls, and how Jade had not only seen past them, but helped me tear them down brick by brick. A pause. Mrs. Henderson presented us with a tiered cake that looked exactly like the soufflés we'd attempted that first night. Little lopsided, but made with love. To the couple who proved that the best recipes can't be perfected, she said, raising her glass. The sound of dancing. We danced to Al Green, to Nina Simone, to songs that made us feel like we were the only two people in the world. The sun began to set over the bay, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold. I looked around at our chosen family and felt overwhelmed with gratitude. We honeymooned in Savannah, a city full of the kind of stories we love to tell. We spent our days exploring hidden squares and historic homes, Jade photographing everything while I researched the tailies behind the architecture. The sound of camera shutters clicking, but the best part was the quiet moments morning coffee on our hotel balcony, evening walks along the river, the way Jade would reach for my hand without looking, like it was the most natural thing in the world. We were different people than we'd been a year ago, stronger but also softer, more aware of how precious ordinary moments could be. A pause. I keep thinking about what our life will look like, Jade said one evening as we watched the sunset. Paint the Savannah River gold. 5 years from now, 10 years from now, do you think we'll still be giving tours? I considered the question, imagining us older, grayer, still walking the streets of Mobile and telling stories. A soft laugh. Maybe, I said. Or maybe we'll be writing books or teaching other people how to turn their trauma into triumph. Maybe we'll have kids or a dog or just each other, and that'll be enough. She squeezed my hand, and I knew that whatever came next, we'd face it together. Coming home from our honeymoon felt like stepping into a new chapter of our story. The apartment looked the same, but we moved through it differently, as wives, as partners in every sense of the word. There were wedding cards to read, thank you notes to write, and a business to get back to. The sound of mail being sorted, the stack of letters was overwhelming. Notes from people who'd taken our tours, congratulations from fellow business owners, and surprisingly, a letter from the mayor's office. The city wanted to recognize us with a small business award for our contribution to Mobile's tourism industry. A pause, emotional. But the letter that made me cry was from a young woman named Sarah, who'd taken our tour 6 months earlier. Dear Lillian and Jade, she wrote, I wanted you to know that your story saved my life. I was planning to hurt myself because I thought there was no place in the world for someone like me. But listening to you talk about finding love and building a life together in Mobile, a city I'd always thought was too conservative for queer people, made me realize that maybe there's hope for me too. The sound of tears. That's when I knew we'd done something bigger than building a business. We'd created a bridge between the past and the future, showing people that love stories don't always have to be hidden, that sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is refuse to be invisible. 2 years after our wedding, Wander and Tell had grown beyond anything we'd imagined. We'd hired 4 full-time guides, expanded to offer tours in Birmingham and New Orleans, and we're developing a documentary series about hidden LGBTQ history in the South. The sound of phone calls and booking confirmations. Jade's photography had evolved too. She'd published a book called Love in the Margins, featuring portraits of LGBTQ couples from across Alabama and their stories of finding acceptance and community. The book won a regional photography award and was being considered for national publication. A pause, but success brought its own challenges. We were busier than ever, sometimes passing each other like ships in the night as we rushed between tours and meetings. One evening, I came home to find Jade asleep at her computer, editing photos from the day's shoots. The sound of gentle waking. Hey, I whispered, kissing her temple. Come to bed. She looked up at me with tired eyes, and I saw something. I recognized from our early days the fear of losing what we'd built, the pressure to keep proving ourselves worthy of our success. That night, we made a decision that would reshape our business and our marriage. We were going to slow down, be more intentional about the work we took on, and remember why we'd started this journey in the first place. The sound of wine being poured. We sat on our balcony with a bottle of wine and talked until dawn about what we wanted our life to look like. Not just our business, but our actual life, the day-to-day moments that made us who we were together. A pause. I missed the early days, Jade admitted. When it was just us walking the streets and discovering stories. When we had time to really see each other, not just pass each other in the hallway. I nodded, understanding exactly what she meant. The sound of gentle laughter. So let's go back to that, I said. Let's hire a business manager, cut back on the tours, and remember what it feels like to explore together. It was scary, turning down opportunities and scaling back when we were finally successful, but it was also liberating. A year later, we were walking through the French Quarter of Mobile, just the two of us, no tour group to guide, no schedule to keep. It was a Tuesday afternoon, and the light was perfect for photography. Jade stopped every few steps to capture something, a detail of ironwork, a shadow on a wall, the way I looked when I was lost in thought, the sound of comfortable silence. "Do you ever think about that alley?" she asked suddenly. We were standing in front of a mural that hadn't been there before. A beautiful piece depicting the diversity of Mobile's history. Not obsessively, I said, but sometimes. Usually when I'm feeling grateful for how far we've come. A pause. I think about it too, she said, but not the way I used to. Now when I remember that night, I think about the choice we made. Afterward. To heal together, to love loudly, to refuse to let them win. She took my hand, and her ring caught the afternoon light. The sound of a camera clicking. She photographed our joined hands against the mural, our wedding rings visible, our scars faded but still there. "This is going in the next book," she said. A reminder that love isn't just about the pretty moments. It's about the choice to keep choosing each other even when it's hard. 3 years after our wedding, we found ourselves back at Sweet Delights for another anniversary, not of the attack this time, but of the night we'd met. Mrs. Henderson had called to invite us to a special event, the bakery's 20th anniversary celebration. The sound of laughter and conversation. The place was packed with couples who'd met in her classes over the years, including several who'd been inspired by our story to be more open about their own love. There was something magical about seeing all these different kinds of love in one space, young and old, gay and straight, some with children, some without, all united by the simple act of learning to bake together. A pause. Mrs. Henderson gave a speech about how baking, like love, was about taking simple ingredients and creating something beautiful through patience, care, and the willingness to start over when things didn't turn out perfectly the first time. The sound of applause. When it was our turn to speak, I looked around the room and saw our story reflected in all the faces, the couples who'd found each other against the odds, who'd chosen to love despite the challenges, who'd built something lasting from the simplest beginnings. I stood up with Jade beside me, her hand warm in mine, and looked out at the crowd. 5 years ago, I began. We were two strangers who got covered in flour and burned some cookies. We had no idea that we were starting the greatest adventure of our lives. A pause. People ask us all the time about our secret, how we've built a successful business, how we've maintained a strong marriage, how we've turned our trauma into triumph. And the answer is simple. We show up. We show up for each other, for our community, for the stories that need to be told. The sound of agreement from the crowd. Love isn't about finding someone who completes you, I continued. It's about finding someone who inspires you to complete yourself. Someone who sees your potential and helps you believe in it. Someone who holds your hand in the dark and helps you remember that dawn always comes. Jade's voice joining mine. Jade took the microphone. Then her voice strong and clear. Lillian taught me that every story matters, that every love is worth celebrating, that every person deserves to be seen and heard. Together, we've learned that healing isn't about forgetting the past. It's about writing a better future. It's been 10 years now since that night in the bakery, 7 years since the attack, 5 years since our wedding. Wander and Tell has become more than a business, it's a movement. We've trained guides in 12 cities, published 3 books, and our documentary series has been picked up by a major streaming platform. The sound of children laughing. We have a daughter now, Emma, adopted at birth 3 years ago. She's got Jade's curiosity and my love of stories, and she's already showing signs of wanting to change the world. Last week, she asked why some people don't like it when 2 mommies love each other, and I realized it was time to start telling her our story. A pause, emotional. Some people are scared of love that looks different from theirs, I told her. But love is love, and the most important thing is that it's real, and it's kind, and it makes the world a little bit better. She nodded solemnly, then asked if we could make cookies like the ones in the story. The sound of laughter, so we did. The 3 of us in our kitchen, making the same kind of mess we'd made that first night. Emma got flour in her hair, Jade got chocolate on her nose, and I got that same feeling I'd had 5 years ago that this was home, this was family, this was everything I'd ever wanted. People often ask me what I've learned from our story, what wisdom I can share with others who might be struggling with their own challenges. And I tell them this: love is not a destination, it's a journey. It's not about finding someone who makes your life perfect. It's about finding someone who makes your imperfect life worth living. A pause. Our story didn't begin with a hookup in a hotel room or a romantic meet cute at a coffee shop. It began with flower fights and burnt cookies, with 2 women who were brave enough to be vulnerable with each other. It was tested by violence and trauma, but it was strengthened by our choice to heal together instead of apart. The sound of Jade's laughter in the background. I learned that scars don't make you broken, they make you strong. That love doesn't erase trauma, it gives you the courage to transform it. That the best stories aren't the ones with perfect endings, they're the ones where imperfect. People choose to love each other anyway. Tonight, as I sit at our dinner table with Jade and Emma, I think about all the moments that led us here. The burnt cookies, the flower fights, the gallery opening, the attack, the hospital, the healing, the proposal, the wedding, the business, the challenges, the growth, the love that kept us going through it all. A pause. I think about the young woman who wrote to us, who said our story saved her life. I think about the couples who've taken our tours and left holding hands a little tighter. I think about the city that's slowly becoming more welcoming because we refuse to be invisible. The sound of Emma asking for another story, and I realize that our story isn't over. It's still being written day by day, choice by choice, in the small moments and the big ones. In the way Emma looks at us and sees not tragedy but triumph. In the way Jade still takes my hand when we walk down the street. In the way we've built a life that honors both our pain and our joy. So if you're listening to this and you're afraid that your story is too messy, too complicated, too broken to be worth telling, you're wrong. Every story matters. Every love is worth celebrating. Every person deserves to be seen and heard and valued. A pause. If you're struggling with trauma, with fear, with the feeling that you're too damaged to be loved, you're not. Healing is possible. Love is possible. Joy is possible. It might not look like what you expected, but it can be even better. The sound of pages closing. And if you're wondering whether it's worth it to take the risk, to open your heart, to choose love even when it's scary, it is. It absolutely is. Because the alternative is living a half-life, and you deserve so much more than that. Jade is in the bathroom, washing her face and getting ready for bed. Emma is asleep in her room, dreaming whatever dreams 5-year-olds dream. And I'm sitting here, thinking about how grateful I am for every moment of this messy, beautiful, imperfect life we've built together. The sound of footsteps approaching. Come to bed, Jade says, appearing in the doorway in her favorite Pajamas, her hair loose around her shoulders. She looks exactly like she did that night in the bakery, beautiful, confident, ready for adventure. But now I know what I didn't know then, that the greatest adventure isn't finding someone to love. It's learning how to love them well. The sound of sheets rustling. We settle into bed, and she reaches for my hand in the dark, her fingers intertwining with mine like they have thousands of times before. "Good night, Mrs. Morrison," she whispers. "Good night, Mrs. Morrison," I whisper. Back. A pause. And as I drift off to sleep, I think about that young woman who asked when I knew I loved Jade. I think I finally have the answer. I knew I loved her when I realized that every scar on my body had become a roadmap leading me back to her. But I knew I'd love her forever when I realized that every day with her was a choice I'd make again and again, no matter what. So yeah, our skin-to-skin blind date began in a hospital ward, but our forever, that started the moment we decided to love each other's scars and all. And it continues every day, in every choice we make, in every story we tell, in every person we inspire to believe that love always finds a way. A final pause. This is our story. But more importantly, it's proof that everyone deserves their own love story. Everyone deserves to be chosen, to be cherished, to be loved exactly as they are. And if you're still waiting for your story to begin, don't give up. The best chapters are often the ones you never saw coming.